Oh, hey, Chris.
Hey Chuck, how are you?
Good. We're back again for another
We
pod.
we are back. It's been a fun weekend. I've really enjoyed it. Hey, let me tell you how I kicked off the weekend. I had a monster clinic, and I saw that there was a WashU basketball playoff game, D3 championships, and I'm in the middle clinic, and I texted my wife and I said, in an alternate universe where I actually get out of clinic on time, I would love to bring the kids to this basketball game. Uh, and lo and behold, I actually finished clinic ahead of schedule, got all the dictations done, and was in the car. I was like, holy smokes, we're going to make it to this game. So we walked to the WashU gym with the kids, and we enjoyed our first D3 basketball game.
That is so awesome. And unfortunately, they lost in the playoffs last night.
But
Um,
they did win that game on Friday night, and
yeah,
it was, I mean, I've never been in that arena before. It was raucous. It was pretty loud for being a D3 crowd. It was pretty impressive.
yeah. I think they do well with crowds in the playoffs. Regular season, not so much, but it is a very fun environment. The basketball is very good. You're right. It's a not appreciated opportunity in our community to go support WashU basketball.
Oh, it was fantastic. I mean, for that to be within walking distance of our house, I didn't realize, my son and I have attended basketball games before for the SLU Billikens, which is a different experience in and of itself. But
Mhm.
now that he's older, he's into it, and I had to explain the rules, which, it's like I take it for granted that everybody knows that if you shoot from behind the arc, it's three, and if you shoot, because he's like, why did they keep getting so many points? I thought every bucket was just 1 point. I was like, all right, we have to do the whole explanation.
That is awesome. So that wasn't the extent of your weekend activity. So last night you prepared a feast, I understand.
Oh yeah, there's I got this book that specifically pairs, usually it's like recipes and then you're like serve it with this wine, but it's like for this wine, make this dish, which I like marching orders. So I prepared a bunch of dishes and had Marty Boyer over and Marshall Burks came over too, and we had a grand time. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, the preceding that, I taught a little grant writing workshop for our PGY2s, which was super fun. I think that not many residency programs have that sort of opportunity.
We talk about exposing trainees and honestly exposing ourselves to different things, such as grant writing, such as leadership. The question's always, when's the right time? You want to do it, you want to do these things at a time when maybe it's becoming an interest or maybe it's becoming a requirement. You do it too soon, it's underappreciated. You do it too late, and maybe the opportunity has been missed. What do you think about teaching grant writing skills to PGY2s?
I think that I went into it with the mind state of, let me teach them something that they can use. Because yes, our residents have to write a grant. That's so our partner David Bergen has taken over the resident research program and has done a really nice job in terms of creating some additional structure around it, taking what Mike Kelly started and really refining it. And they have to apply for some kind of grant, whether it's OREF, Hand Society, AOSSM, the various spine societies, et cetera. So it is useful to them, I think. But then also what I had them do was, develop an elevator pitch. So because I think the best part about grant writing is really refining your idea and making sure, it's an important idea and that you're going to get something out of the project. So I had them give a 60-second elevator pitch about why their idea is important. Because if you can give an elevator pitch and an effective elevator pitch, you can write a grant. Because a grant is just a way of communicating. It's a piece of marketing. So if we worked on that, and I think that was, I think, well received. I think everybody had a good time doing it. It was a way to make it interactive on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, that's awesome. As I said to you before we logged on, I probably could have benefited from that session. But it's really great that you're sharing that knowledge and that information with them. And who knows, how many of those eight will pursue academics and pursue academics where they may ultimately become someone impactful in the field with grants and the like. But certainly starting them off this way really sets them on a course to make that possible.
Well, I've said on this podcast before that I don't love working on the weekends. And some may say, what are you doing on the weekend, doing all this kind of stuff? But, it actually gets into what we're going to talk about today. And I think that those are the moments that allow me to recharge, kind of for me, like we've talked about in the past, I think for cooking has been something that I've kind of leaned into because it gives me energy and it allows me to enjoy the company of other people. And then, the giving that talk was actually really fun. And it, again, was re-energizing. So is allowing me to refill my cup, so to say.
Yeah, there's been a lot of work on burnout, and one of the simplistic things I read recently, and I think we all appreciate this, is if weekends are designed, or if weekends become a time for you to catch up on all your work every weekend, that's a problem. Because that's not what weekends should be. And granted, we all work on the weekends and the like, but it really is about using the weekends and hopefully during the week as well to find those things that give you energy. And that's been a theme on this podcast because honestly, I think we both feel the podcast is one of those things, despite being the work. But I like how you said that, and sharing your grant writing skills is awesome.
So let's talk about, we haven't done a leadership article in a while, and you have pointed me towards this gem from HBR in 2001 called The Making of a Corporate Athlete. And we've talked a little bit between the two of us about how perhaps we should think of ourselves as athletes. And yes, there may be some eye rolls, that we're not really athletes,
There
but
are definitely eye rolls out there.
some would say. But I think there's a lot of really good stuff in this article. And so the authors are Jim Loehr and Tony Schwartz. It's an HBR article from 2001. We'll put it in the show notes. I think it's an interesting idea, and they talk about finding your ideal performance state. How do you approach this kind of thing from your perspective, Chuck?
Well, I think the article is really, really good. And the fact that it was written 20 years ago, um, it hits on a lot of the topics that we're talking about today. Now, granted, these are age-old topics that bringing the mind, body, and spirit to kind of peak performance level, that's not new. I do think it's more accepted. I'm guessing in 2001, there wasn't a lot of talk or nearly as much talk about burnout and performance and kind of making holistic improvements to self to do a better job and the like. So I think there's a lot of really good points in this, and a lot of them really hit home for me. So I think we should dive in and kind of touch on at least some, if not many, of the points they raise.
Well, they talk about finding this ideal performance state, and it's finding a rhythm in which you're recovering, you're seeing the stress during, the work week or whatever from the job, but then also finding moments of renewal. And they talk about how, at least in the athlete, those that are most successful have rituals in which they will recover and re-energize between moments of stress. So, for example, say you're a tennis player, between points, you have some kind of ritual where you're fidgeting with your racket strings or something like that, allowing you to bring your heart rate down, recover, and then you're able to get back into something super intense. I can't say that I have rituals like that, but I certainly have found ways in which to recharge. And they talk a little bit about kind of physically. I mean, to me, that is the workout, and that's why I think the morning thing is super important to me.
Yeah, so I think the tennis player example is interesting because they're going through this process of stress recovery, stress recovery, stress recovery very quickly. Whereas for you or I or a corporate athlete, it's a different process. But I think one of the important points they make, and we've talked about this on this podcast, and it's no mystery, is that, and they say, we learned that the real enemy of high performance is not stress, which, paradoxical as it may seem, is actually the stimulus for growth. Rather, the problem is the absence of disciplined, intermittent recovery. And my gosh, does that ring true? And I think all of us understand that recovery for you versus me versus the next person is going to look different, but we all have to recover. We all have to recharge so that we can, do more and not shying away from the stressful moments. I think that's really important.
What are the things that you do to recharge? And has that changed as you've taken on more responsibility? I mean, you initially obviously started as a surgical resident and, you're doing cases, and then now you evolved into taking on a lot more administrative responsibility in which you see a lot of stress in a different way. Has your, well, how has your recharging or re-energizing routine changed?
I think one of the dangers of corporate or academic or non-academic life is, if I look at my life today, what I accomplish in any given day or any given week, and think about whether this would have been possible as I started my career 20 years ago, I think I would look at what I accomplished in a day to be physically impossible. Um, and the reason that it's obviously not is that we all become more efficient, get better at what we do over time. Um, and so I think I am far more efficient and effective today than I was in the past. And I have to say, though, the danger of this adding responsibilities, which is part of development in any corporate structure, um, is you get tasks, you get more. You do a good job, you get more thrown on your plate. The danger is that we stop taking care of ourselves to get the work done. And I have to say, I'm guilty. And it's only been the last few years that I've really recommitted to, taking care of myself, exercising more, doing things that kind of mentally help. For me, I recharge in a few ways, probably in some that are similar to you, some that are very different. Certainly, spending time with the family is part of it. Sports in general and basketball in specific. Unfortunately, in my advanced age, watching less than playing, or watching more than playing, and doing things where can't, I don't want to say don't, but I can't think about work. Um, and that's really hard because I think we're all so into our job, it keeps kind of coming back. And if you go for a run, you have plenty of time to think, you end up thinking about work. That's the danger. But doing things where I can't think about work because I'm thinking about other things is important. So talk a little about yourself. Obviously, cooking, family. How do you think about recovery periods?
Well, before we get into that, I did want to mention that your name has come up several times when, we talk about basketball in the, I'm in South County Clinic. I'm talking to Jeremy Hartman about going to this basketball game. And then we're talking about how one of our physiatry partners, Nate Olafson, played ball when he was at Cornell College. And apparently the physiatry team they can hoop, and they are willing to take on the rest of the department, and everybody say, hey, Goldfarb can hoop too. So I think there's, while we don't want any Achilles tendon injuries from the old man, it would be great to get you back on the court. I'm sure there's an open gym somewhere where we could see what you got.
You know, I love basketball. I love playing basketball. And I think, as I've said here, basketball is the sport where you are incapable of doing anything else, or at least I am incapable of doing anything else other than thinking about basketball, which is part of the reason I loved it. I like the competition. I don't know if I would survive, but if the old adage holds true, your first time back on the court in a while, you're going to shoot well, then I'm willing to find out.
I've never heard that adage, but if maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, we'll see. Yeah, I mean, for me, the physical recovery is, obviously important. We're not stressed in the same way that actual athletes are, but it is the emotional recovery. And I think for me, the exercise stuff is obviously about taking care of your body, but then that's honestly the only time that I kind of really get to myself, right? And sometimes, inevitably you do think about work, but sometimes you have some clarity when it's just you doing something and having the time to think about it. I remember as a resident going on runs in Central Park and coming up with some really great research ideas because I just had the time to think. And I think that the time to think is something that is completely underrated. And anybody who's interested in an academic career, if you're a trainee, if you're real serious, you need to build in some time to think because otherwise you're going to get pulled into all the other things like you mentioned earlier. So And that's something they mentioned in this article here about, taking care of yourself physically. But then they also mention, one of the anecdotes they have is that, somebody mentions that they now exercise for their mind as much as for their body. So I think for me, it is a combination of the two. And then obviously getting to spend time with the kids where I'm trying to be better about this, but really play. Like, not like, hey, I got to do, like, not making it so much, let's spend some time together, but I got to get to this next thing. Like actually doing the things that they're doing, because I'm realizing that those moments are passing me by.
Yes, those moments will pass you by quickly, and truly engaging is something you don't want to miss. You're exactly right, and the fact that you appreciate it is something. This paper talks about four different parts of the pyramid, and they literally have a pyramid. And the base of the pyramid is physical capacity, to build endurance and promote mental and emotional recovery. And that's what we've been hitting on. And I think, you're certainly really good at that. I try to be good at that, but it's not just the working out. It's sleep and eating right and all those things. And again, increasingly in 2022, we understand the importance of both of those additional factors.
So they go next to the next rung up on the pyramid is emotional capacity. So what I've found is that sometimes when there are stressors, frustration, anger, that kind of thing, it really does drain energy. I remember having a difficult time with some scheduling stuff in the OR, and it just affected me in so many ways. And I didn't like how I felt about things. It was very pervasive. And that was a struggle for me. And I think I've gotten on the other side of that. But it showed, people could tell I was not myself. And that's not something that I like. So that's one way that in that resonated with me.
Oh, for sure. It those type of factors, whether it's a difficult relationship at work, whether you're not able to accomplish what you think because of a some type of bottleneck or roadblock, those are really important things. And what's interesting is, and what I highlighted from this section is the following: close relationships are perhaps the most powerful means for prompting positive emotion and effective recovery. And that's where we started this episode, right? Is how do you engage could be family, could be friends, but those relationships, and for me it's almost never around work friends, because I feel like I need to extricate myself from the work environment so I don't go back and talk about work. And so we can do it in different ways, but the friendships are incredibly important way to recover.
Agree entirely, but it's interesting how much that we missed, I think, during the pandemic or the earlier parts of the pandemic. We joked in our last episode with Steve Moran about, being an introvert and all that kind of stuff. But I think, when I interviewed people when I did my interview for the fellowships, I was in a different room than you. One of the questions that I asked was, how do you feel like you have changed during the pandemic, or what did you find out about yourself that surprised you? And there were a fair number of people that said, I realized I'm more introverted than I thought. And they were like, I'm glad that I'm okay with that. And I think people have tighter circles now. And I think those relationships mean more to them, especially when we had that taken away from us for so long. And hopefully now we're on the other end of it, to at least going in the right direction. And one thing that a couple of paragraphs before was music. And I really appreciate, as much as I joke with our trainees about music and stuff in the OR, it really does put me in the right headspace. And it's one of those things where you just listen to songs that you were listening to when you were growing up. And that just puts me in a different place. Whereas I know that if I'm about to enter a very tough part of the case, if the right kind of music is on, it's just going to go that much better. I don't know. Do you feel that connection to music in the OR? It's very different for some people, I think.
It is interesting hearing psychologists talk about different things, whether it's smells or sounds, or things that I guess take you to a different place. And music is certainly one of those. I think it's less vital for me, although I would only agree that music is incredibly important. And in this article, they talk about, of course, athletes, where they're trying to get ready for a performance. Music is always a big part of that. So yeah, I really like that, and I think it's important.
The OR knows when they need to put on different music. I will say, I had one patient who we were doing a tendon transfer with her awake, and she picked Stevie Wonder as her station of choice. And I thought that was fantastic. I forgot how much I love Stevie Wonder, and musically, it's kind of perfect for the OR. So the next level of the pyramid was mental capacity, and I admit I'm not great at some of the stuff they talk about here. They focus a lot on meditation, and I'm just not good at that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. And yet I feel like I'm missing something. I really do, because again, with so much burnout discussion over the last few years, there have become increased technological solutions that offer meditation space, and easy ways to engage. I don't do it, although I would tell you that it is the athletic stuff that kind of gives me the same. I don't think you can separate athletic engagement and meditation. To me, they can be one and the same. And maybe that's a cop out on my part because I don't do the formal meditation. But I've tried. It just didn't work very well for me. Have you tried?
Superficial attempts, so to say. I ended up just falling asleep, to be honest with you, to be very honest. There's something in here though I liked that I actually have incorporated consciously or unconsciously, is going on walks. I don't know how much of that was, seasonal affective stuff here in St. Louis, but when we would have those kind of, random 60-degree days over the last couple of months, I would definitely go for a walk. And one thing that I want to do more is just go for a quick lap in my neighborhood, and come back, because that does make me feel better for sure. So maybe that's my way of rationalizing that I don't meditate, but going for walks is helpful.
It's funny because Talia and I are doing more of the same, and I'll do, I'll sometimes will walk and listen to a podcast. I don't know that that's exactly the same, but it is time away, time to yourself, which is important. Again, these are all ritualistic, and that's what this article emphasizes: is kind of the things you do over and over, in all different states to help. I like the comment from Jack Nicholas, in this section where he talks about the fact that he performed, obviously under intense pressure. And he says, Jack Nicholas said, I've developed a regimen that allows me to move from peaks of concentration into valleys of relaxation and back again as necessary. That's the result. It's not really how he got there, but that's the goal. That's absolutely the goal, to be at a transition.
Yeah, and I think the thing that they mentioned here about visualization is obviously very relevant to the surgeons that are listening, especially the trainees. I mean, I try to ask our trainees, how do you see this case going? Like, what's the flow here? And some of it is very tactical and logistical. Like, for example, I did some median to radial nerve transfers the other day, and I literally wrote out on the drapes, here's what we need to do, because I actually have to do this before tourniquet-related ischemia kicks in and we can't use a nerve stimulator anymore. And the trainee commented that he liked seeing that kind of laid out. And oftentimes I will ask them, okay, so what's the flow for this case? Like, what are we going to do, and how are we going to do it, and what are the priorities? And I think going through that exercise is useful, because both of us will then visualize how the case is going to go, and then it just becomes a lot easier. So it's spending a couple of minutes, either at the scrub sink, or less so now that we have all the different solutions we can use. But right before you put the tourniquet up, I think pays off in dividends from a very tactical perspective.
Yeah, visualization is incredibly powerful. It does get spoken about more in the true sports arena. It's, how are you, seeing yourself, um, taking that shot and watching it go in the net, whatever the sport may be. Um, I think visualization, I like what you said for sure. I think of visualization, the OR, and it can be step planning and kind of visualizing all the steps of the surgery. It can be really effective if, for example, you're thinking about putting a perfect K-wire center in the scaphoid. That before you start, you take in your surroundings, you take in kind of the specifics of the anatomy of the patient you're considering, and you visualize how that's going to go. So it can be a broad sense of visualization, planning, or it can be a very specific step. And I think either of those can be really helpful.
So Chuck, do you consider yourself a spiritual person?
The answer to that is no, I do not. But I think this article does a nice job of saying that spiritual does not equal religious. Spiritual will mean different things to different people. And if I can, I'll quote them one more time. So let's be clear. By spiritual capacity, which is their fourth level, we simply mean the energy that is unleashed by tapping into one's deepest values and defining a strong sense of purpose. This capacity, we have found, serves as sustenance in the face of adversity and as a powerful source of motivation, focus, determination, and resilience. That's pretty powerful.
Agreed. And I like the distinction between, people will react a certain way when you say spiritual. I think it really is just, defining that sense of purpose. I mean, why are you doing it? One of the books that I read last year that I like a lot is Simon Sinek's Start With Why. And I talked about that when I gave Grand Rounds, because I think it's a super important concept to have a compass, to have a core of why you're doing what we're doing, why we're grinding day in, day out in some circumstances. Because if you don't understand that and you don't take the time to reflect upon it, it's just a treadmill.
Yeah, and they actually get into that. I think their two examples are both really good. The first is about a woman they call Anne, who had been trying to stop smoking, couldn't do it. But when she became pregnant, it gave her a higher level drive to stop smoking. And that's a simple example, but it was more than about her. It's about her values. It's about the importance of her unborn child, etc. I thought that example was good. And then the last example was probably more powerful, and also perhaps one that may hit home to people like us a little more, about Richard, the stockbroker from New York City.
Yeah, I mean, he was clearly in a grind, and was commuting, and classic New York situation in which he would leave early, come home late, missed his kids, and just he was caught in this trap of not understanding why he was doing what he's doing. He essentially had a breakdown, and in a way, it allowed him to reset and think about what really matters, what's important. Because I think that what I've been guilty of is not taking enough time to take stock again and again and again. And I think I'm going to try to be better about that, and making sure that I understand, here's what brings me joy. Here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And, let's make sure to focus energy on that, as opposed to getting caught into how many patients am I seeing? How many papers am I writing? How many cases am I doing? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, really well said. And that's exactly right. And I think that's always the goal. And, if you get stuck on some of the stuff that are, I guess, quantifiable factors, and you lose sight of the less quantifiable and more subjective factors, it can be hard. And I think, therefore, this paper is a good one. It really does. And it doesn't hit you over the head with fighting burnout. But it does get to a lot of things, which I think will impact how I think about each day.
And it did hit you over the head with that because it came out before burnout was coined. It was a thing. So that is a useful reason. So Chuck, we have to end with the win. We haven't done this in a couple of weeks. So what's your win for the last week?
My win is that I've had two work-related social interaction opportunities, which felt great. One we hit on our last podcast when I was with Steve at a question writing session for handboards. Another was an anatomy session, and both of those felt great. Just interacting with people in a way that I haven't done during the pandemic is incredibly re-energizing, incredibly so. And I didn't realize, I thought I missed it, but I didn't realize how much I missed it until I had it again. What about you?
Recent win, we had our fellowship interviews a couple of weeks ago, and Emily Camden, our coordinator, did a fantastic job coordinating all of it. Went off really well. The survey we sent applicants afterwards got a lot of responses, very positive. So that was a lot of work going into that, and I'm very happy that that went off well. So that's a work-related win for me.
Yeah, no, that's a great one, and it was as we've talked about, was a great day, and yeah, looking forward to that match.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time.
All right, have a good day.